Today I'm going to be making an easy tote bag, but not simple. There are a lot of amazing elements to it that elevate it and give it a lot of style, but it's not difficult to do. I don't mind that my lining will show red thread when I top stitch the top. So I'm going to go with the red thread. This fill guide is 12 inches long, and I may trim that back later. I'm going to put a little keychain hook inside of the bag, just dangling from the top, just so that your keys don't get lost in the bottom of your bag, which can be very frustrating. And it's going to be as simple as pressing this in half and then pressing each side towards the center as well, and folding it over and stitching along the sides, which is the exact same method to sew the straps. So giving that a press, but what I'm also going to do is on one end press that over just a little bit towards the inside to give it a nice clean finish where the little hook is going to be. So that one's prepped. Now we're going to do the exact same thing with the straps. So the straps have center 2 inches fused with woven interfacing. I don't like using fusible fleece in the straps because it makes it so thick and bulky. So these will also get folded in half and pressed down the center, and the outer edges are going to get folded in and pressed down as well. And what's nice with the fusible fleece ending an inch from the edge gives it a nice little guideline for where that will get pressed to, and then it'll get pressed in half again. For the key fob, I am going to start sewing where on the open sides on the frayed end, the one that has not been finished. And it's just going to be about 1/16 of an inch from the edge. And on the end here where we folded it under, we are going to stitch across as well. One more stitch. I don't have room for a full 2.5 stitch. I'm going to adjust that down to a 1 millimeter stitch just to advance me a tiny little bit. I do that a lot when I'm running out of room for a full stitch, but I'm not as close to the edge as I would like. I just adjust my stitch length for that one single stitch. Just don't forget to put it back. So now we've got this little end that's nicely finished, nice and clean. I'm going to put my keychain on that, or my little hook, and about 2 centimeters, and then just going to stitch a little square, just the width of your foot from the hardware. All right, so key fob is ready to go. So the straps are the same way. Do the open side first. You don't need to sew across the top and bottom if you don't wish. that prep work is done, we'll set those aside. Got my little label. I just used the little tag right now that sew into the side seam. That little guy ready to go. The exterior of my bag, I have 3 panels that are 16 inches wide by 10 inches high. I've got this 2 that are quilting cotton, and I have interfaced those with a fusible fleece interfacing in preparation. And I chose to go with fusible fleece rather than woven interfacing because it just has a bit more loftiness to it. And for the base of the bag, I am using a marine vinyl. So it has got nice, pliable, and yet a little bit of structure to it for the base of the bag. So no interfacing on that. So that's the exterior of the bag. The lining is 16 inches wide by 28 inches. So my exterior are 10 inches each. So that equals 30 inches in total, and my lining is only 28 inches. Now, the reason for that is these panels are going to get sewn together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I wish a 1/2 inch seam allowance so that I can top stitch it down nicely. And we're going to lose a 1/2 inch here and a 1/2 inch there. So that's 1 inch lost there. We're going to lose a 1/2 inch here and a 1/2 inch there. So another inch lost. So rather than being 30 inches as it is stretched out, that will compress down to 28 inches when it is sewn up. A perfect match for the lining. I am doing 1 pocket today, but it's going to span the width of the bag. So the pocket dimensions are 16 inches wide to match the width of the bag. And you can make it as deep as you wish. Mine happens to be 13 inches. And there's no great big scientific formula for that. I just used my 6.5 inch ruler times 2. To prepare my pocket, we will fold it right sides together, and I'm going to stitch a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm going to press this seam open and then flip it right side out. Gone ahead and pressed it flat as well. So this is where the seam is, that's actually the bottom of the pocket. So I'm going to top stitch across the top. There's the seam, but I'm top stitching on the opposite side of that. So after top stitching that, give it another good press. Definitely gives it a nicer finish. So I'm going to mark the center of my bag. I'm using a thermal erase pen because I do not like using chalk very much. So there's my 8-inch mark. All right, we have the center of the pocket. What I need to do is mark my positioning from the top. And I think I want it about 3 inches from the top. This has got to be one of the easiest type of pockets to make. And yet look at that pop of color on the inside. Isn't that amazing? So you may notice the pocket sticks out past the fabric a teeny bit there, a little bit here, but that's okay. When I'm sewing the lining together, I'll be using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. That way, little things like that can be hidden. Alright, so we're going to take this to the machine, and what we're going to do is not a 1/2 inch. We just wish to go just along the edge of the pocket, making sure that catch all of the pocket. We need to sew down the side, across, up, over, back, over 1 stitch, back down, over and up, like a great big double. just going in about a 1/16 of an inch. I'm going to stop about 1/4 of an inch from the edge because I will do a second row right beneath it at the very end. Or even better judge is just the width of your presser foot. Mine's a narrow presser foot, so you might have a bit of a wider. It's all good, it's fine. Just so that afterwards I can go to put a second row beneath it. And here I come up to my center line. There we go. And I'm just going to try to go right beside my little pen mark so that my going back down, I'll be on the other side. I gave that a good press, so my ink disappeared. All my markings are gone, so that's amazing. And it looks nice and crisp with that good pressing. And on the reverse, you can get a better idea of what was going on with the sewing machine. Down the sides was just to catch the pocket and the lining and secure those together. And then I went down, over, up, back, forth, down, over, and up. And then I came back and just did a second row of stitches underneath that original one. And the double layer of fabric for the pocket makes that nice and thick. 2 pockets, easy peasy. All right, let's continue on with lining. I do wish to have this right sides together. I'm doing boxed corners on this bag, bearing in mind that we have a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm just going to mark that. All right, so that is going to be our seam allowance. We wish to have a 2-inch square butt taken from this seam allowance. A perfect 2-inch square there. And do the same on this side. All right, let's cut those out. So I need to leave an opening to turn the bag. Just mark about even the width of the pocket, a little bit wider. You need to sew from the top to the mark, 1/2 inch seam allowance, back stitch both sides, back stitch from that mark down to the bottom, 1/2 inch seam allowance, all the way down that side. All right, there is my 1/2 inch seam. Leaving an opening there for us to turn the bag later. And what I've also done is just pressed one side of the seam open, so that makes it easier to do this in place. All right, we've got our corner sewn up, and we have the inside of the bag. All right, so we have our 2 interfaced top of the bag and the marine vinyl. So just be aware that if you have a directional print, you wish to have the top of your print on the outsides of your fabric here, because that will be the top of the bag. All right, so stitch a 1/2 inch seam allowance on both sides. All right, how amazing is that? Normally I would advise to iron, but because we are dealing with vinyl, we don't want to iron it. Of course, if you're using a cotton or a canvas or something, then by all means go ahead and iron it. You don't have to use a marine vinyl for the bottom. You can use any fabric you like. You can, just use a contrasting fabric. What I am going to do though is just finger press that really well, and I am pressing so that I will be top stitching on the fabric side of this. Pull that out. So now a row of top stitching just along the edge of the fabric. To top stitch on the vinyl, and this is fairly thick, I'm going to switch that to a number 3 for the stitch length. I'm just going to go the width of my zipper foot. Before I attach the straps, I am going to cut out our corners. Alright, time to box our corners. So this is going to be a very thick seam with the fusible fleece and the marine vinyl. I think my machine will be able to handle it. If your machine can't handle sewing through that many layers, when you come to top stitch, the previous step, rather than push everything up towards the fabric and then top stitch, you would be better to separate it and then top stitch twice. So if you had that separated, you could top stitch there and here, and then you would have your seam butterflied, and you would not get the same amount of bulk that I'm going to have. So if you don't think your machine will handle it, butterfly those seams when you top stitch, like open them up, rather than pushing them all in the same direction. And again, we're going to note our 1/2 inch seam allowance, and the seam allowance, and then we will make our 2 inch square from there. I'm going to open this back up and attach my straps. All right. Center. So I have found basically the quarter point marks, which is where the straps will go, or it would be 4 inches from each side, whichever way your mind works. And the 12. I'm going to center that. Have that stick out about 1/2 inch. While I'm here, I'm going to attach my little label. I'm very bad at forgetting to do that. I'm going to stitch that in place, stitch across there, back stitch back and forth, and on those as well. Alright, so those are secured. My tag. The important part to line up is where the vinyl meets the fabric. There's a little extra on top on one side or the other that you need to trim if things have gotten a little skewed. So be it. Alright, let's get those side seams with 1/2 inch. Alright, so I did back stitch over those side seams. but everything did, I don't have skipped stitches, so everything did work out okay there. And I'm a little screwed there. Just gonna trim it. Okay. Well, if I would have butterflied that before I top stitched, like spread them open like that, that would have made it easier as well. One tip I've learned with working with marine vinyl, I suppose all vinyls, if you like that accent, or if you do like the vinyl, it's best to use it at the bottom, because by the time you've folded everything over on the top, that can get very thick and bulky too. When you go to top stitch it, those side seams can be too thick to top stitch, or very thick and very difficult. So something to bear in mind, to use something a little less denser on the top. But marine vinyl or vinyl on the bottom is amazing, because you can set your bag down and you don't have to worry about how, it getting dirty. Like if it's all fabric, then there's always that concern, what am I setting it down on? So if you need to set your bag down on the floor, if you have a vinyl bottom, then you can just wipe it off if it gets dirty. One tip for working with vinyl as well, you don't want to sew over a particular spot too many times. It can perforate and cause a weak spot, so you can sew on it too much. So just something to keep in mind. All right, let's go stitch across those corners. All right, so those have been spread open and open over there. All right, time to turn this inside out. Finger press those corner seams. I am going to sneak in here with the iron and just go up to where the vinyl meets the fabric. All right, so that is the exterior of the bag done. And those little seams are lined up very nicely there, so that's great. My little bag tag. All right, we need to insert our key fob, and I'm going to do it on the pocket side so that, should you wish, you can put your let your keys fall into the pocket, and yet you can easily retrieve them with the strap. 12 inches is, they're going to sit at the bottom of the bag, which is not a bad idea, so I'm going to leave it. I'm going to make it stick out a little bit above the top of the bag by about 1/2 inch, so that'll just be dangling and touching right at the bottom of the bag. All right, I'm just going to go stitch that in place. All right, time to put these two pieces together. Just going to gently fold the bag. Make sure the straps are hidden, tucked away. Start by lining up the side seams and make sure that everything is spread open on those side seams. Like I said, even this will get kind of thick once we start top stitching. Don't be afraid to use lots of clips. Again, we're going to use 1/2 inch. We're going to sew around the perimeter of the top of the bag. Back stitch over those straps. I've back stitched over the straps and the key fob. Now, there we go, there's our opening. Gently pull this through. Alright, we have some threads to clip, but first of all, so we have this pocket opening. I'm going to go back to the ironing board, and this side is pressed in. I'm going to press that pocket as well, just to get a nice even finish on that. And I'm going to sew just past the opening a little bit. Just a very thin little seam allowance on that. Clip around the top. Don't be afraid to use lots of clips. And again, this is where it'll get thick for top stitching, right in here.